Everybody, mental notes of everything Dr. Perryman said? We need a quiz. Yeah. Anybody want to come try and recreate that? Yeah. Just shoot from the hip. That's one of our favorite things about Dr. Perryman. Each year, Alden and I get an opportunity to talk with him before the event. And he's quick to remind us at the very beginning of the call. Now, you guys know. I mean, I realize it's 48 hours until I give the presentation. I don't know what we're going to talk about. I'm going to say, that's great. We don't either. That's why we're on the phone with you. So let's try and narrow in on it. But we have a great time with Dr. Perryman each year, thinking about all the things that are impactful to us as business leaders in this community. And I only wanted to offer one thing. And first of all, I'm forgetting my formal training on event speaking. My name is Michael Lavender. You'll see it emblazoned on various things and screens around here. But in 2015, I left a lucrative career in banking because I had an observation, and it was this simple. When I was in college, this was right after Microsoft Excel put their first solver. The company is named Frontline Solvers. They had just worked out the partnership to put a solver inside of Excel. And at this time, we had professors in our IT department that were going to show us this amazing, cool thing. And we'd open up these blank spreadsheets and we'd do things like this. Okay, you have 800 feet of 2x4s, but they're cut into 8 feet sections. So you can't glue them together on the end, right? You only cut. And to make a chair and a table, these are the links that you have available to you. What's the maximum number you can make of complete sets of chairs and tables? And this crazy solver thing, if you learn how to set it up right, in a fraction of a second, you could spend hours setting it up, but in a fraction of a second, click solve, and there was your answer. Mathematically defensible and perfect every time. And I remember just being blown away, and then thinking, well, what am I going to do with that? I'm not building chairs and tables. What I did know was that I wanted to have things like a house and a car and be able to buy food and pay my bills, so I found my way into the banking industry. And for over a decade, I worked with a lot of you in this room and other business leaders and owners around the community. And I kept hearing a consistent message from business folks. We have all this information, and as our bankers are asking us these questions, but we don't often know how to get that information from our own systems. And it's one of those lay in bed at night and stare at the ceiling moments when you think, well, someone just needs to start doing that. So one day I walked out of the bank. I think all 4 of the first people I called and said, I've got an idea and I quit my job. Let's see if we can figure something out. And here we are all these years later. What's interesting to us about what's happening is that back up to those days in college, working with that really simple Excel model, no artificial intelligence. Dr. McCarthy and I were talking about this. No one had coined the term data scientist. You know, the class that I actually took was decision analysis. It was a very IT kind of sounding name. And it certainly wasn't cool. But now, every morning as I get my news feed articles, it's AI this, large language model that, autonomous systems, infiltrating, coming at, breakneck speed. And the thing that Alden and I have realized from our role as data analysts and modelers is that the businesses of East Texas have equal footing to do the things that some of the largest enterprises in the world are using in these realms. So that's the genesis for what we're going to talk about today, is to take experts who are at the top of their field at some of the largest enterprises globally, using cutting-edge concepts that we hear about in the news. We've hand-selected them to come here today and translate that for each of you. What can we do? What can we do with it as business leaders in this community, within our own businesses? Because like it or not, right now in this very moment, your company is amassing data. And the only question is, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to take advantage of that great resource that you've got right at your fingertips. So without further ado, let me introduce our panelists. We have Mr. David Kolsky, Raghava Kadamudi, and Dr. Michael McCarthy. Now, all of you probably saw our material, so you've seen the bios. So that we can get right into things, I won't read the bios to you, but esteemed gentlemen, we do have some of their bullet point information on the screen. The other housekeeping item that I'll mention to you, you'll see a QR code circle every once in a while. Unlike Dr. Perryman, since we're dealing with a very technical subject, we're not just going to at the end say, who has a question? We do want to get the best use out of our panelists' time. So when you see that QR code come by, if you'll just scan it from your camera, that'll launch an email, and we're going to be accepting questions by email. So at the end of the panel, we will look through those questions and we'll pose some of those to our panelists. The other thing is that thanks to Video Magic, we are going to have a full production video of today's panel. So if you had colleagues that couldn't attend, or you just want to revisit some of the subjects, also scan that QR code and just send us a note. Hey, I'd like a copy of the video once you've got it produced. So we'd be happy to forward it along. Without further ado, my colleague and business partner, Alden Moore, is going to be our moderator today. And he has been working with the panelists for quite some time, honing in on this, making sure that today's experience is one that when you leave the room you think, okay, I know the first steps and tactics that I need to take. So, Alden, by all means.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you all for being here. I know everyone in this room has a lot of demands on their time, and we promise to make this a valuable use of yours. Thank you to our panelists as well. As Michael mentioned, Dr. Michael McCarthy is joining us, tenured professor at Utica University, senior data scientist with Amazon. Just going through the list, Mr. Raghava Kadamudi, over 15 years of practicing experience leading the fields of data science, started largely or instrumental in starting the data science and data analytics program at Pratt & Whitney, and now leads much of the data programs at Bell Flight. And Mr. David Kolsky, triple major in economics, finance, and management at A&M, joined Bain & Company after graduating, one of the most prestigious consulting companies in the world, then private equity, then led VP of revenue operations for tech juggernaut Scorpion, about a $250, $300 million a year organization, and now is the senior director of strategy for an AR startup called Built. I'm your moderator, Alden Moore. As a quick background, my first work out of college was leading the finance and accounting work for an advanced manufacturing startup called Ascentium that was ultimately acquired by Nexa, then dove deeply into this world of data and algorithms, launching an algorithmic trading hedge fund that was acquired by a group out of a private equity group in Houston, and then finally co-founding an artificial intelligence startup in the senior healthcare space that was acquired in 22, at which time I was able to join Lavender and Company and bring some of that work and experience into back to hometown here in East Texas and Tyler. So we're thrilled to be with you all today. Our goals for this 90 minutes or so is very simple. We want everyone to leave with a good understanding of data science, data analytics. What do these buzz terms mean? What could they mean for my organization? What are some exciting developments in that field that are going to impact the world in meaningful ways? And then specifically, what are the tactical steps that my organization can take to build a data-centric organization and lead that next generation of business advancements into the future? To start us off, I would love for Dr. McCarthy, Mike, could you paint a picture for us of the field of data analytics? Where have we been? Where are we going? what are some of the most exciting things that you're seeing right now?
Thank you, Alden. So excited to be here. My name is Michael McCarthy. Everyone calls me Mike now. Data science, when I got into it, didn't exist. When I started teaching data science, it was not even a subject really. All my advanced degrees are in geography. And everyone has data. Everyone in your organization has data. And that's sort of that first step on the journey, just recognizing that you have valuable data. And the next step in a data journey usually is trying to find some sort of reporting on that. And then moving from reporting to some sort of insights that can become actionable and provide some return on investment. You know, a lot of times you'll hear that as the low-hanging fruit, moving from just recognizing it to that low-hanging fruit where I can get some return on investment. And then the last, like kind of the superpower of the data scientist is sort of that prediction, modeling, and then applying it. So there's this journey from not really having, just having the data and then realizing that there's value in it and then moving to where you can find return on investment and value. I tell all of my students, and I know my colleagues tell me this all the time at Amazon, if you don't have return on investment, all the BIPs, all the incremental improvement that you think you're doing, you're not really doing anything for the business. We have to have return on investment. We have to have value. And the other part I want to talk about with this kind of data journey is that there's kind of a data scientist within an organization, like a data organization within any sort of team that can be in one person. It's kind of like a trifecta of skills that we need. The first one is that domain knowledge that everyone here has, right? You're a domain expert in banking and healthcare. You bring that. All those anecdotal experiences that you have, that's super valuable in a data science space. Right? You can't not have it. I use a double negative there on purpose. You have to have it. Right? The next one is that sort of scientific inquiry that you want to have. There's some stats that we need to have with that, some basic understandings. But it's not hard. It's a muscle that we can definitely exercise. And then that last one that might feel the most intimidating, but it really isn't, is sort of making it all work together, and that's some sort of hacking skill, some programming skill. And that's the ultimate data scientist, is someone who can hack, someone who can think scientifically, and someone who can provide that contextual insights to really go, this is what we need. This is the future. This is what we need. This is that problem I need to solve. And not everyone needs, not one person needs to own it. The team needs to own it. So, but with that, Dave, I know you have something to follow on this.
Yeah. Well, my name is Dave Kolsky, and I think on this panel I'm the only one who has not lectured at a university about data science. So I'm more of the everyman on the panel here, but I've had experience enacting data-driven decision-making in medium and large, and some small-sized businesses as well. And what I've seen work most effectively is actually, kind of back to what you were saying before, adopting this philosophy of data science and treating business like a science. At this point in 2024, we're all basically data scientists. Every single thing that we do is based off of certain data inputs that we see as driving potential outputs. We make decisions off of that. But if a business, every single business can be brought down to its component parts, all the way down to a really simple equation of we make X, it costs Y to do it, and we give it to this person. And every single one of those inputs has 1,000 inputs within them about how much you can save here or spend there, or how you can transfer from this person to that one. And every single one of those decisions is tied up in data points that we start to capture, but we don't always know what to do with yet. And I think as we think about data science, and we're going to say words today like AI and large language models, which are frankly intimidating to a lot of people, myself included sometimes. But as I frame it and think of it in my head, and I would encourage you to do the same thing, think of it from that most simplistic equation of we are looking at inputs and outputs for my business, and all these are tools to help me do it in a larger and more effective way at scale across a larger community than I could just do myself. And that's the entire purpose behind this, and the more we can adopt that philosophy, I think the more effectively you can enact new tools.
Awesome, thank you so much. Along those lines, I mentioned that I want everyone to walk away from the conversation with not only a tangible understanding of how to build a data-centric organization, but also the motivation and the drive to do so. To get us started on that, could the three of you give use cases, experiences that you've had where data-driven decision-making, where these algorithms, these processes and mindsets that you're talking about have led to improved profitability, cost-cutting measures, increased efficiency to drive positive outcomes for the businesses and organizations you've been a part of?
So my favorite story in this case is with a nonprofit. This nonprofit, one of the main goals of nonprofit is to stay in business. And they do a lot of that by getting donations. And they work really hard at it. And but they kept a lot of data. The donors are, in a lot of ways, a customer. And they have a lot of customer engagement. And they kept a lot of notes, a lot of data on it. And they weren't really fully understanding how or who was going to donate and how. They wanted to better understand really their customers. And so they took their data they already had and they put it into a very simple model. And the most likely thing to show that what someone's going to donate is that they donated in the past. That was kind of a no-brainer, not a big surprise. But the next most predictive variable they found was if they got a phone call from the director of the nonprofit. And no one had ever considered, of all the, they get, some fundraising person can call, they can go to the gala, they can go to an open house. Of all the 25 different touch points they could possibly have, the number one thing, besides if they donated before, was a phone call from the director. Well, based off of that insight, and the data they already had, and a simple model, they weren't applying it until they were able to go, oh, our director needs to make 5 phone calls every morning to start reaching out to our key donors. And then what they did next, the next after it was like, who are the key donors? And then they began to score donors on the potentiality of them donating. And so it really helped this particular nonprofit with data they already had to get some really generative insights to help them be more efficient and effective in their fundraising, and therefore provide more benefit and value to what they were really focused on. It was pretty transformative, and it's become pretty, the insights for each nonprofit may vary, your mileage may vary, but these things, it was very, very powerful and impactful. It was a direct, insight from that early model they did on data they already had.
That actually reminds me of an experience I've had at Scorpion, which Alden very generously called a juggernaut. I would call a medium-sized business, I would say. But we would do digital marketing for local service businesses. So think plumbers, electricians, but also doctors and lawyers, etc. And we had a really good sales motion. We would sell and land a lot of new customers. We had a really good cost to serve. We would bring up their webpage, we'd start doing their advertising for them. We were very profitable. But we were a leaky bucket. We would be selling 5 million deals and we'd churn 4 million deals. And people kept going to other agencies, or they would go do this work or that work, and they didn't care that we had AI-driven chat bots on their website. That didn't matter to them. And so part of my job when I was running revenue operations, it's the entire customer journey. It's why is it that a customer comes, why is it that they stay, and why is it that they grow with you? So it's really important for us to understand why someone would or wouldn't stay. And so as I thought about it like a scientist and started thinking about this business, I was using hypotheses to say, okay, looking at a person who has churned, what about them is different from those who haven't? Right? Just like you would with any science experiment. How do I have independent variables that I can control? And we started looking at different aspects of when was the last time we talked to them? When was the last time they went to our webpage? When was the last time that they got a lead from something that we did for them? And one of the things that we noticed was whenever someone had a really distinct drop-off in the amount of times that they went to our web portal, 6 months later, they were way higher at a churn rate. So we just learned that if we saw someone drop off, we could call them the next week, help fix whatever issue they were having, and the churn rate overnight started to go up, or started to go down, and our retention went up. And so there's little things like that that as we think about data science, so much more of it is looking at a problem, identifying how you could treat it like an experiment, and how you could use that information to make real-world decisions. And that was my experience with that business, and it made a pretty big impact.
And churn is something with every business,
Yeah.
right? Every business has customers. These use cases are, can be applied to any industry in a broad way.
So, this is Raghav Katamari. I want to take a little bit of a different approach to it with respect to the supply chain. I think we are all in the, most of the audience or most of us are in the business of serving customers, be it in the digital world or in the product or in a tangible world, right? So one of the data science use cases that I extensively worked on is how do I make sure I have a right product always on hand so I can serve my customer while keeping low inventory so my operation costs are low. So if you see, I mean, one of the largest car manufacturing company, they replenish their entire warehouse. When I say entire warehouse, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of inventory every 14 hours, and that's only possible with efficient supply chain if they can predict what part their customer is going to order in the next few days or in the next few hours. So all that is possible with the enormous amount of data that they have. And with the company that I work with, Bellflight, I mean, when you're flying a helicopter, be it in the army or be it in the military bases or be it in the commercial, you don't want your customer to have his flight or his helicopter sitting on the hangar saying there is a failure in the gearbox. At the same time, as a business, we don't want to just build gearboxes and let them sit in our warehouse because it's a cost-intensive operation. So, and just to give you a bit of a background of this, it takes almost 18 months to make a gearbox right from the raw material all the way to the end product. So we are in a business where we want to predict this particular incident at least 18 months, if not more, to say, okay, at a specific point in time, in the next 18 months, in so-and-so location, we might need a gearbox readily on hand. Not earlier, not later. Because the earlier we try to put it, we have to spend a lot on the cost. The later we put, we might lose the business. So the point is, with the enormous amount of supply chain, inventory data, and the production process, and bringing all this into the picture, we were able to efficiently identify the opportunity, at the same time keep our costs low.
All fantastic use cases. Raghava, I'd love to know what just one or two of the biggest drivers of that optimization algorithm are. That through analysis, if you're able to share through your analysis, through your digging through the data, what kind of things actually did become predictive of that customer demand so far down the road? I think that'd be really interesting for a lot of our manufacturing and development clients.
So I think one of the key factors, firstly, what I want to emphasize is before even identifying this particular problem, we started to save tons of data. I mean, you could call petabytes of data and start looking at what kind of trends is happening. I mean, we know. I mean, this is a number of hours, like maybe 1,000 hours or 2,000 hours or whatever number of hours is a typical gearbox that could come. But that's not always the case. I mean, if you see historically, I mean, traditionally we used to say every 10,000 miles you go and replace your air filter in your car, or every 15,000 miles change the oil. But now, if you notice with the latest trends, you don't even, I mean, your car automatically sends you a signal saying, okay, with the kind of vibration that your car is producing, you don't even have to wait until 10,000. You might have to replace your oil or replace your filters in every 6,000 or whatever the time frame. Or if you're a good driver, you may not even need to replace certain parts for every 12 or 13,000 miles. So all this is happening not just with tribal knowledge or with whatever the information we have, but with collecting the enormous amounts of data, analyzing the trends of how or at what temperatures or at what environment this specific helicopter is flying out, or this particular component is being serviced. So we took all the data, we did a lot of massaging to the data, we were able to identify the trends and then see a pattern of evolution of, okay, so-and-so time, okay, considering what kind of vibration or what kind of so-and-so information we are receiving from the data, we were able to, to a certain degree, identify, when we might need a specific part, a specific component or anything at any given location.
So one just takeaway that I'm hearing from you is it's a process that in many instances there isn't necessarily a shortcut to becoming a data-centric and data-driven organization, but the benefits of the outcomes down the road could be enormous. One thing that I loved about the other couple of use cases that were mentioned, the solutions that were ultimately discovered. Executive director needs to call more. Hey, once people stop using our product as much, they're more likely to churn. Some of my favorite analytical outcomes are those that seem obvious in hindsight, but would be one of only 100 potential solutions at the beginning. Obviously, data and its outcomes will always have to be validated by an individual's intuition that they've developed over decades of being in that organization in many cases. But if they're able to approach it from a data-centric way, how much money was that nonprofit able to save by not hosting 10 different very expensive fundraisers when that wasn't the driver of their success, but it was instead 5 calls by the executive director? I think that's what I love, and that, I think, frames the mindset of what we can all as business leaders look for those key problems that might be able to be leveraged, or in which data might be able to be leveraged to find effective and powerful solutions to our business needs.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that because it reminds me of another experience I had working with Walmart. I'm now officially not under NDA after a period of time, so I can say the name of the company. But we were working with Walmart at the time, and we were looking at reducing SG&A. And for the longest time, we were looking at what that means for headcount, what that means for potentially back office supplies, or maybe types of software, anything that they would be doing to help reduce their overhead expense. And what we ended up finding was completely non-obvious. And you start to see this a lot. The more you dive into the data, more often you start to find solutions that are non-obvious, but far more impactful than the things that you initially thought they would be. And we realized that Walmart, just so you all know, fun fact, does about 10 transactions a second for the entire year. And every single transaction usually comes with a paper receipt. And we realized if you made the paper receipt, I think the final answer was about 1.5 inches shorter, they would save $65 to $70 million a year on paper. And that covered the whole expense we were trying to get out, and we were done. So we just made receipts. If you guys didn't know, in 2017, your Walmart receipt's about this much shorter, and you're welcome. But it's interesting when you think about it, and it's funny, but at the same time, too, those types of non-obvious cost reduction can oftentimes start to stack up. And when you stack pennies, all of a sudden you start to save a good amount of money, and it's from something that doesn't even impact the business. No one's experience is worse. No one thought less of Walmart for having done that, and yet we were able to save jobs, save tools, save equipment, all of these things that they're looking to get rid of just by making paper a little bit shorter.
Fantastic.
Well, this gets to the idea, there's big insights that come from data. Having the executive director call more donors, that's a big insight. This incrementality aspect is also, that's not the low-hanging fruit that's really kind of juicy to go after. It's the one that's going to, it's going to help pay the bills. It's going to help drive a lot of return on investment for your organization's incrementality. How do we make it just a little bit more, a few more bits, a couple extra percentage points out of what we're already doing to make it more profitable and allow me to serve customers better. So the incrementality is for big organizations, it's kind of where we're at right now. But there's a lot for new organizations coming. There's a lot of really neat insights that can be driven from data.
Now that we've begun to frame the ideas of how businesses in different sectors might be able to use the concepts around data analysis, we're going to circle back to some of that and do our best to make sure we did get the attendee list ahead of time. We're going to do our best to actually go industry by industry that's represented in this room at the end if we have time, and talk about some of the key use cases of these AI models and data analysis in those. But before that, I do want to dive into what it means to build a data-centric organization, especially from those who may be sitting at the perspective of I know that data needs to play a larger role in my decision making and in my company. I hear the terms data analysis, I hear the terms large language model all the time, and I know that some of the largest companies in the world, a couple of whom are represented on this stage, are using it to drive incredible efficiency and profitability, but I'm basically at the foundation level right now. Raghava, from someone who has done that a couple of times, even at very large organizations, could you help us get a picture of if, for that company who knows that they need to be using data, but currently don't have an organization or a department around that, what are the tangible steps of getting from 0 to 1 there?
I think I would piggyback on his Walmart example that no one would have ever thought that bringing an ink a couple of inches down the paper would save $65 million for Walmart until they built an organization with a cultural change that takes decisions through data. So I would, rather than tools or anything, or any data or anything, I would start modulating the culture of the organization in terms of data-centric organization. And I mean, it's a constant evolution and it's a constant journey, and it's an iterative process. But I mean, I understand everyone wants, lot of companies are in the state that they want to do that, but what are the step 1, step 2, step 3? I think the biggest challenge that I could see is lot of companies, I mean, especially small and medium scale businesses, are run mostly through intuition, and that intuition can work very well, but with enormous amounts of data, variety of customers that are coming to each of the businesses being served, it's very hard to scale the intuition, but it is relatively easy to scale the data and the culture around that. So I would start with low investments in terms of what are my biggest KPIs that are currently driving the business, and I would start investing in automating, getting those KPIs readily available at any given point in time for the organization. And as I always said, start low investment, get quick turnaround, get a quick buy-in from senior management, and continue the investment process. Then, if you're asking with respect to the tools, I mean, my always go-to tool for any small or big is Excel. Just like how Michael mentioned, I'm a big fan of Excel, but I also do tons of Power BI. There are tons of readily available both commercial and open source tools that can do enormous amount of compute and enormous amount of help to resources out there that you can do. And with respect to this, I mean, a lot of times this is what I learned. The first major use cases I can see are trend analysis. How is my customer churn rate going on? I mean, what are my volumes looking like? What is my cost looking like? Is there a trend that I can observe? Is there an anomaly that I'm seeing? Maybe COVID is an anomaly situation that we all have faced, right? Is there something that we can learn out of it? And all these are pretty quick wins when you have the data available, and I think these will help start building the culture in the organization to take decisions in terms of data.
So find a couple of big wins, easy wins, and low-hanging fruit,
Yep.
term that Mike used, which especially at the ground stages of really leveraging data and data analysis are fairly easy to come by. Use that to build a culture that focuses and has buy-in around the data collection, the data mining,
Yep.
the data warehousing, all those key aspects of driving those larger insights down the road. Is that correct?
That's 100%. That's correct. Yeah.
Perfect. Along those lines, in the world in which our data, our operations have become increasingly digitized, we still do some on paper, but most businesses have moved largely to some degree of digital or online cloud-based operations that is every day, every minute collecting and storing quite a bit of data. The problem is for most organizations that we interact with, even if they have an enormous treasure trove of data available, it's all still in disparate locations. Some might be in their financial platform like QuickBooks, some's over in a routing software, some's in a customer ERP system. What are some of the really practical steps that an organization can do to bridge some of those gaps and bring some of that data together such that the correlations and the relationships begin to present themselves. And Rakhav, if you would like to take that, Dave, you've also had that experience in small organizations, so I would love for both of you to speak to that where applicable.
So let me take a step back, and I mean, I want to just tell a small story. If you go back to 1800s when Sears started their first stores, I think if I remember correctly, they started as a watch manufacturing company, watch retail company or something like that. But pretty soon, what they did is they had cataloged all the watch selections that they have and started mailing those catalogs to all the existing customers and also the prospective customers. Pretty soon the business continued improving, and then they added another collection of furniture, electronics, everything else. Now, if you close your eyes and imagine 10 years or 20 years now, just before today, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised that we would all come with a single answer, that's Amazon. Amazon is just like Sears, what was it, 150 years ago, but it's all with a digital footprint. And now it's very clear where Sears is and where Amazon is, right? So it's only possible through not just digitizing the aspect, but also how Amazon evolved over in the digital journey. The moment you open up a products page in any product of any Amazon's product, at any given instance, you will be there are hundreds of feeds that are being collected every millisecond of at what part of the page you are. Are you reading the product description? Are you looking at the reviews? Are you seeking the video 10 seconds faster, 10 seconds slower? So all these enormous amounts of data is helping Amazon or is helping you as a customer make an informed decision to either to buy it or to not buy it. If you're just going ahead and adding it into the cart, it is telling Amazon maybe the price is not right for this product, or the particular target audience is not the right target audience for this product. So all this is possible only when you are able to collect the data, and it's not just the collected data, but enormously use this data to properly synthesize and give the contextual awareness of this data to your end user. Yeah.
Yeah.
Please. Yeah, I mean, as I think about, just going back to your question around, there's multiple different systems that are all capturing different amounts of data that are constantly growing and expanding with 1 million data points, and then you have to say, okay, how to make a decision with all of this. The rule that I've always seen work the best is the Pareto, Pareto equation, or whatever they call it. 80-20 rule is what I've always called it. I tried to be fancy, I forgot the name of it. The 80-20 rule, where basically 80% of the solution is going to come from 20% of information. Or pretty much everything you do is 80% of the outcome is going to come from 20% of the inputs. You see the same thing in business, and you see the same thing in this data. And I think the most important thing that we can do in building data-driven decision-making and data-driven organizations is understanding which of the data points fall within that 80 and which of them fall within that 20. And the more that we can focus on the 20% that really matters and see that in an every single week or every single monthly basis and use that to then go make practical decisions off of it, that's a data-driven decision, and that's a data-driven organization. But the more that we just do analysis for its own sake, it's almost, I think I made this joke to all of them, it's like it's treating data analysis like homework, and it's treating like it's a math assignment. And like, I did my assignment, but I'm not going to actually do anything with it. I'm not going to make any decisions off of it. And very often people can get overwhelmed, or they can get underwhelmed by how well data is performing for their business, and they throw it out and they start saying, this is not useful for me, this doesn't apply to me, this isn't helpful for me. And oftentimes that's from misapplication of the process versus actually the process itself. And I would say, when it comes to having multiple different systems and multiple different sources of data, the most important thing is to figure out what the primary drivers are that drive your business, and that you see them on a consistent basis and actually make decisions off of that. And for me, I use Tableau personally. I like that as an aggregation tool.
Is there a process that any of our panelists have seen successful over a number of times of identifying those key drivers of your business? I would imagine that even that process tends to be a data-driven decision.
It is. Can I just keep going?
Yeah.
I would say one of the biggest watchouts. I've been in the software world for a couple of years now, and in the software world, there's a list of KPIs that everyone thinks are most important. So, what's your cost per lead? What's your customer LTV? What was your CAC? What was your? There's a whole bunch of them. They all have acronyms, and there's all metrics for them. Of this is what the industry standard is. This is what good looks like. This is what not good looks like, etc. But what it doesn't take into account is how your actual business operates and what really matters for you and what drives the business for you. And so I would highly recommend, when finding out what metrics matter most, sure, start with what the industry says. And there's a lot of really good free publications where you can go find what a company like me, what kind of metrics should I be thinking of for myself. But then after that, as you look at the simple equation we were talking about at the beginning of every single company is just making something that costs something and selling it to somebody, at each one of those stages, if there's unique parts of your business that say, I really think this is important and this might be unique and I think that I should be driving this part, at that point it goes back to the thinking like a scientist and having a hypothesis, having a few different data points that you think drive that one thing that matters. And you might have some metrics that look wildly different from the industry, but are very important to you because something about your business is uniquely different in that way. The only other caution I would say is you're not a snowflake and you're only different in very small ways, in very small settings. And in most ways, you are the same as everybody else, and that's okay. I just want to make sure I say that right too.
I think I just want to add one. So data science is not about tools, but I think all of us are emphasizing the same point that data science can only function with the business knowledge and the domain experience that you guys carry. So I think you're trying to say the same point in a different way.
As businesses get started in this process of collecting their data, organizing their data, and using it in a collective way to make better decisions, what are some common pitfalls or mistakes that you've seen businesses do that might either become discouraging for the process in general, or worse yet, actually lead to incorrect decisions?
So the most important thing that a business can do is if they want to invest in becoming a data-centric, is make sure your data is of a quality that can be used for information or to derive the return on investment that you want. There's 1,000 cases. We actually have a term for this. It's called GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. You might hear that. If you're not collecting your data from your customers in a routine way, or perhaps you're allowing the customers to self-report different things, like even their address can be something that could have some errors in it. If I type in my street address and I don't capitalize Boulevard in the acronym, or I spell out Boulevard, well, that won't match in another database elsewhere. And I'll never, Michael McCarthy at this address with Boulevard spelled out versus Michael McCarthy spelled with my address, it might not match. So there's some pitfalls with the data quality. And that's, again, getting different aspects to work with each other. You have to be able, and the last thing is that some people, everyone here has probably developed some sort of IT aspect to their business, maybe not. But one thing that makes data science different than it feels like IT. Data science, like, oh, people are using math, they're using Python, they're doing stuff with data. It's different than IT. An IT solution can be one and done. You pay someone, they develop a solution for you, and that solution will work as long as all the inputs work. One thing that's different, and it can be discouraging to others, is that data changes. Your customers will change. There'll be model drift. There'll be data drift. And so data science and these ideas, it's iterative and it's incremental, and it does take kind of that open mind. And one thing that when we get to this mindset, the scientific mindset, you have to be willing to let your gut be checked by some data. Don't let anecdotal stories. Anecdotal stories are very, very important. Right? I know my customer feels this way because of this. Well, let's figure out that. And if the data, might or might not support that, anecdotal stories are very, very important. But you have to allow yourself to be corrected, your mindset to be corrected by what the trends are pointing you towards. And it's very, very hard because our anecdotal ideas, our thoughts, our experiences can be hard to let go, or to feel that you were wrong. And that's very true. You know, no one wants to feel that you had an incorrect perception about your customers, about your business.
We're very story-driven organisms, and our history supports that. And yeah, data can, when it doesn't agree with the story that we've been told, can be challenging. Are there any universal attributes of clean data? I think it would be, most people would consider the idea or importance of having clean data to be utmost. Are there common things that would make data unclean? Are there best practices in generating clean data, or are there universal attributes to look at your data set and say, this is ready for analysis and for decision making? So
the most important thing is to never allow anyone to type anything into a database. Never ever. Right? People make mistakes. I make mistakes. If you're having someone digitize something by typing it in, they're going to make a mistake. The other kind of the grandest principle you ever want with data, this is the kind of data engineering side, is to make sure that you fix the data problems, or the potential for data problems, at the earliest possible time in the data pipeline. And that's usually when it's being entered. Right? You don't want to do a check before you're modeling, although you do that too. But you want to make sure that the fixes happen as early on. So when a customer is entering in their address, there are APIs out there that'll allow it to ping, and they go, did you mean this? Oh yeah, right, that's my address. And it's all in caps. It has the zip plus 4 at the end. It's going to be perfect. And then I was working with a client that was a insurance company up in upstate New York, that they could only fix it that way. Because to fix it afterwards is all manual, and it's more people typing into a database. And it's very, very hard, so you have to fix it. And so that's just a general principle. There's a lot, data engineering, it's its own thing. It's kind of foundational, making sure your data is clean and appropriate. I would love to hear
one of
those
the
guys.
key aspects is automating as much of the data collection process as possible. Machines, although they're not perfect, make less mistakes than humans if they're correctly or well built. And I do want to be sensitive to time and move pretty quickly through these next few questions so that we have plenty of time for anyone in the audience to talk about anything that they would like to. I would like to add to that, if you've been submitting questions, which we would encourage you to continue to do so, and we're not able to get to that because of the way that you're sending them in, we'll of course have your email address and we'll get a response to you from our panelists as quickly as we can. Along those lines, I would be remiss to have these individuals up on stage without discussing some of the new advancements in technology that we've been seeing with large language models and AI. We've all discussed that these are very much like a personal trainer or something like that. If you're not doing data analysis, to further that health analogy, first we probably just need to start eating some vegetables, getting some good sleep, maybe working out every now and then we get to really leveraging these new technologies and tools. But these do have the capability to supercharge everything that we're talking about today. And I get the sense that some of their capabilities might, you talked about the manual aspect of cleaning data. There's a lot of manual aspects to collecting data and bringing it together that have made it almost cost prohibitive for many of the organizations probably in this room. I get the sense that some of these AI developments, some of these chat GPTs of the world may be opening up the accessibility of analysis and value to the data to businesses and organizations here in East Texas and here in this room that previously only the world's largest organizations could have afforded to do. One, do you agree with that assessment? And two, could we dive into some specifics around how a business might utilize some of these new technologies to collect data, to query data, to leverage their own and external data in a way that drives business insights.
I think I agree to the point that now these large language models, the chat GPTs, all the hype, whatever we are hearing, they definitely brought the AI to very small businesses, definitely. And I mean, a couple of days ago, or maybe a week ago, there's a news that Microsoft has released a Copilot for every individual you and I can readily use for just $20 a month. And those can open up enormous amount of potential to every one of us to be a seasoned data scientist. We can be our own data engineer or a data scientist who can readily start evaluating our business just sitting with our laptop in our drawing room.
Everyone go watch some videos on Microsoft Copilot.
Definitely, yeah,
We
definitely.
don't have time to cover all the technologies and all the tools.
Yeah.
But I also understand that data science is more of a mindset than a collection of tools. But
Yes. I
appreciate the examples. There are some key ways that AI is driving those capabilities to $100 a month. Incredible.
No, all I was going to say is when you think of these language models, probably the best way to think of it is a person who is able to read something and summarize it and repeat it back to you, or take something and categorize it for you based off what it's seen before. So if you think of it that way, anything that involves summarizing or responding to an input based off of the information it's had before, like, oh, you told me this before, therefore this is going to be my answer for you when you ask me that question. Or, oh, these things go into these 4 buckets, therefore you give me a 5th thing, I know which bucket to put it in because I've seen these buckets before. So anytime you look at your information and it could be solved by a robot that thinks that way, that's exactly what these tools do. And so if that involves categorizing data input, that's possible. If it involves responding to a customer on a chat box on a website, that's also possible. Anything that takes typical inputs and can be repopulated given prior experience, that's exactly what these tools can help with.
I think I just want to add another point. This is something I made sure I wanted to tell you. So whatever the LLM tool or the chatbot that you are selecting, just make sure that it has the ability to say with humility that I don't know the answer. That's very important.
Yeah.
You don't want you don't want your chatbot to hallucinate or come up with some creative ideas to answer something that's incorrect. You want your chatbot to be as honest as you and say when it doesn't know, it just says I don't know, and there's a human in the loop, he can answer you better than this.
And I'm going to jump in here. I'm going to jump in here because last night, Rakava and I had a great conversation at dinner about that. And I asked him, I said, no matter what, make sure you bring that up today. That so many of us got bit in the early days of AI and all this. The first time you tried it, it was horrible. It didn't work. It didn't work. It was broken. It took you too long. It never gave you an answer, or it gave you the wrong answer. Afterwards, if you want to hear about my first interaction with ChatGPT, I'll tell you how I schooled it on some of the facts about the Titanic sinking. I was like, that's not right. And at the end, it's like, oh, you're correct. And I'm like, well, I don't trust this thing. Now, as Rakava says, look for the models that have been developed with that mindset. If you're going to put these things into your business, be careful. It's phenomenal technology that's going to change the world, but look for the ones that have built into it, I don't know, or let me get help.
I want to continue down this vein a little bit. There's a term that I hear all the time, and frankly, I get the sense that it's very powerful, and I have no idea what it means. Individuals or individual organizations training their own LLMs. You hear, oh, you can give it your training data and build it around your organization. You talk about different GPTs. So the idea of taking the ChatGPT base that OpenAI and Microsoft has spent billions on and training it on your own data, incredibly powerful, but practically, to be totally honest, I don't know the steps to do that or what that means. Could you just give us an overview of what a business might do to create that?
So I'll jump on this one. There was right when ChatGPT kind of hit the street, someone in my network connected me with someone else and said, hey, I'm going to make my own. And I was like, tell me more. And what this person's business model was to take what's called a foundational model, like a ChatGPT 3.5 or 4.0, and then give it more data, specialized data. And because the large language model, ChatGPT 3.5 in this case, is very generalized. It is just trained on so many. And by the way, the 4.0 version of ChatGPT is just, so much bigger, right? So if you have a choice, go big, right? But there's a lot of value in small ones. I digress.
$20 a month.
Yeah, I digress. And you take what's called a corpus, and that just means a body of information, and you just feed it in. And you have some infrastructure choices, some of how to index it. And then it becomes your large language model that's specialized for your use case. It takes a lot of data to do this. And some of the data seems super frivolous. This particular use case was in a cyberspace, and the data this person told me was just a bunch of logs and data from a whole bunch of journals. And I was like, go for it, dude. And he was really asking me like what type of indexing. And I don't think I gave him the answer he wanted to hear. But that's how it's done. And it takes a huge amount. You have to think about the relative size of a ChatGPT 3.5 or 4, and 5 is on the horizon, and how much you could possibly add to it to really make it specialized. Bloomberg did it for his financial aspect, and that's another example. There was a cyber one from the startup that I talked to, and then Bloomberg does it. These things, believe it or not, there's a lot of large language models that live in the open source space, meaning that with you and a computer and someone that might know what they're doing, can actually access a large language model that's probably smaller than 3.5, and then do this. But it is the next level. That is on the horizon for even larger.
Seems tremendously powerful, and I guess two thoughts with that. One, there's just released GPT Store with a collection of hundreds of these customized models. So it very well may be that someone's already done this for an organization like yours. Two, if our business is just not generating that level of data, that this is something that we're interested in, what are some sources of open source or relatively affordable external data that businesses can bring in to maybe train something like ChatGPT, or maybe just utilize in a powerful way from a linear regression standpoint or any other data analytics standpoint? There's a lot out there, a lot available on the web. Are there just a couple of sources that our audience could go to get some of that key data?
So I teach, so I push my students to a lot of open source data, and there's just a bunch of it out there. There's the federal government, local governments. I can actually, everyone here right now on your smartphone can look at the cost either through Zillow. Zillow just gets their information from our local counties. That's nothing special. We can get that too. And so there's just a plethora of open data out there. But I'll tell you, one of the vendors that I use when I teach with, and just because they're great, they give us software. It's wonderful. It's called Alteryx. And I use it for my students to help them understand. There's no syntax. It's just sort of like, oh, I put in an import cube here, I connect the wire to this one. It's going to clean my data. It actually does a relatively good job with some standard data cleaning practices. And then I do it a profile. But Alteryx, it's beautiful software, and it's $5,000 a copy, but not too unreasonable. They also have a data package that goes with it. And the data package is powered by Experian. And it's 3 times as much, but it's a way to augment data that you might already have. So there's lots of vendors out there that have relatively reasonably priced data. And this is just one example
and so
of
it's
many.
just the awareness that exists, the awareness that you're not limited to only the data that your business has been able to collect, but that there are sources out there that can augment your customer data, for instance, with all kinds of personal information about those customers in order for you to target or market to them more effectively.
And just to support what you were saying too, I also have experience using Alteryx, and I'm also a large fan of it in multiple ways. One, at Bain and the consulting firm, we used Alteryx for our data analysis. When we're working with large corporations like that, we would use that exact same tool and that exact same information, and that same tool and information is available to everyone here in this room. And two, it is probably the simplest introduction to data science in my experience. Because to your point, it's not an intimidating interface. It's boxes that you draw lines between. Like I have this file, and I want to connect it to that file, and you draw a line, and you can pick which data point is the skeleton key that connects the two, and it just does it for you right there. So the user interface is extremely easy. It's used by some of the largest corporations in the world, and it's
Southwest
accessible
Airlines
today.
Just to add to that, I mean, a lot of people might miss that. Your local library has tons of data that you can source from. And I use my local library for some kind of data that I need. And the local university, I'm sure the University of Tyler should have tons of data that you can go and ask. I don't know, maybe they might charge you a little bit, but that will be one of the good source of information to get.
That's a great point. That's
So,
a great point.
Alteryx, RapidMiner, K9 is the open source version of all that. This vendor-based data introduction to data science is widespread and it's powerful. And I teach with it for a reason. Southwest Airlines uses it for almost all of their data science for a reason. And I went to an Alteryx conference half a decade ago. It's amazing. This is not an Alteryx commercial, but it's because I've used RapidMiner and I've used K9, and they all have a very similar flavor. But that is one of the, if you're worried about getting into data science because you don't know how to Python program, well, with large language models, that's becoming less of a need, and with these other software programs, it's becoming much less of a need. So there's really no excuse.
All right. Thank you all so much. We have about 20 minutes left in our allotted time. Of course, we and the panelists will be sticking around for as long as you need us to, within reason. And at this point, we can either go one or two directions, and I'm going to offer this to the audience and to Michael based on some of the feedback that he's been seeing in form of the questions. We can move on to the audience questions, or we can go through that kind of industry by industry look at use cases from data-driven and experienced minds, and those might end up overlapping quite a bit.
Well, this might help the decision there. Every single question that's been submitted, one by one, y'all check them off. With an exception, and those, or with a couple of exceptions that are very specifically, what about my industry? What about real estate? Tell me more about what I can do in manufacturing. Underscoring that you guys did highlight, what's that first step? What are the main things that impact your business? You already know them. You're a leader in your own industry, in your own company. You know those things. Start tracking them. Start looking at the trends. So that's kind of a given. But for some of these industries, have our panelists seen particular implementations or might have particular ideas about something as broad as for real estate, etc. When the QR code comes up on the screen, still, if you've had a question that you've been thinking as the panel has been going, submit that because we're still watching it. But quite literally, you guys have done a great job. As the questions come in, I'm reading them, I'm like, well, I just finished talking about that one. I was reading one and Ward said, this one's great. And then y'all started talking about it. I'm like, okay, fantastic.
Perfect, perfect. Well, let's jump into that then. I know that there are a lot of real estate people in the audience. I know that there are some manufacturing individuals in the audience, some healthcare, some municipal government, some banking. So we're going to do our best to include at least all of those. And if I miss something, some technology, if I miss something, raise your hand and we'll do that as well. Before this, and we might not hit something that's applicable to you within that industry, but I hope that this exercise is going to be really valuable in understanding and conceptualizing, sparking some creative juices on helping you think of something that's maybe tangential that you can go back and apply in your industry. Let's get started with real estate. Mike, you and I were having an interesting conversation about this early on. Given your background in starting in this field pre the discipline even really existing, such that your PhD actually had to be in geography.
Yeah, I'm a geographer. I'm a geographer by training. So I started at West Point in 2 advanced degrees, all in geography. Back before data science was a discipline, before it was cool, just like Michael. And I think it just means I'm really old. But so in real estate is a spatial-driven industry, right? What are the three most important aspects of any piece of property? Is location, location, location. It's very important that if you do choose to do real estate analysis, and I think all the real estate agents in here probably have a great understanding of this, that you need to have a spatial analysis mechanism, or a GIS, geographic information system. It's different. That data is different than tabular data. It's different than visual data. It's different than audio data, because there is a location, and in geography, it's like economics. There's no rules, or there's no laws, but we have some general principles, and one of them is everything's related to everything else, but things that are closer together are more related than things that are further away. It's generally the case, not always, of course. So real estate, if you want to get into real estate analysis, the tool for that is some sort of spatial analysis with the GIS. And there are some leading vendors in that. Like if you're using a Google product, it's not bad, but they're not the leader. But there's a lot that can be done. The other part about real estate, that all companies that have retail locations generally use a GIS to help them identify the most optimal locations. I don't know if you've ever noticed where Starbucks puts theirs, but generally when they open them up, well, they put them everywhere, right? That's not fair. But a lot of them they're generally placed on the right-hand side of the road on the commute in. And Dunkin' Donuts is the same. I've seen it where they actually close one down on the wrong side of the street, and they put it in on the right side of the street, on the main commute coming in. And then those are just general principles, but understanding that spatial data is different than almost all the other data that we've been talking about, customer data. Now, what's really kind of brilliant about spatial data and real estate data is that customers usually have address too. And so when you want to take your customer analysis to the next level, link it with some spatial analysis, where you will start seeing clusters where your customers live, and your neighbors of your customers are great potential customers. And these aren't new ideas. These aren't Michael's ideas. These are all very common practices. So once you want to take some of these things to the next level, it's spatial analysis. And real estate is, there's a lot of neat, I live in New York, there's a lot of neat analysis on where gentrification will happen next. There's a lot of leading indicators that you can find on those sorts of things. So anyway.
I think that's just fascinating, because I think a lot of the real estate analysis even that we see, it doesn't fundamentally use spatial data. It's a lot of maybe average income in this metro area, and those kind of things, which are interesting and important, but actually digging into the pathways of your commutes and county data that's publicly available. You noted that most of this is publicly available. Appraisal values house by house and aggregating that in a visual and spatial way, and that there are a lot of tools to do that we can talk about later. I think that's really fascinating. Mike, I'm going to stay with you for a minute and talk about retail. Almost unlimited potential, seemingly, but are there a couple that may be non-obvious or particularly powerful use cases that you see?
Well, so one of my favorite, I don't know, we talked about this a little bit, I don't know if this is one of my favorite retail clients. They sell milk, and we work with them because, well, they sell milk products. Let's be very thing. And this particular, it's a huge regional milk company, and they really needed to really understand. And milk's perishable, right? There's a lot of great things that we sell that are made and sold that you can put it on a shelf and it can sit there for 5 years, and it's totally fine buying it on day one or buying it on day 1,500, whatever, 5 years is later. But milk has a very short shelf life. And so getting the forecasting just right is pretty important, right? Because at the end of the day, there's actually not just cost for not selling it, there's cost to get to dispose of it. So this particular dairy that I was working with, it's small, medium. Even though it's a large regional dairy, it's still relatively small. And the key is that if you don't have time to forecast for all, it's too complex to forecast for all the different products. They got Greek yogurt with vanilla, they got Greek yogurt, and so one of the the aspects that they do is they're able to simplify it by looking at variability of sales and the quantity of sales. And I'm going to use my hands here, so I'm going to wave around a little bit. But if you think of an X and Y axis, they have high variability, high sales. Think all the special creamers you get in Thanksgiving time, or and then you have low selling things that have low variability. And then you have all the ones that are very consistent with their variability or with their sales. And they're able to compartmentalize all the different categories they have into 4 forecast models. And you actually can make it 9 if you increase, but it's very, very brilliant. And the forecasting really helped them minimize their costs and then also, because you have milk, it's your big input. Do I put it over here into cottage cheese? Do I put it into sour cream? Or do I put it into this special seasonal creamer that has high sales, high variability, high sales? So in this retail space, in this forecasting is one of those things that we all want forecasts. And we all generally, we can forecast just about anything, what we need our employees to do, what we're going to sell, what we need to produce, or what the raw materials we need to produce this. So it's, I don't know if this is where you're going, Alden, but one of those aspects of retail is that we want to be able to put the right products in front of the right customers at the right time and minimize perishability. And forecasting is perhaps one of the best tools to do that.
I want to highlight that even more. We mentioned this as we were preparing, and I just want to double click on it because I think it's so massively important and so broadly applicable. The idea of taking your product types and dividing them and categorizing them into some broad categories like high variability, low volume, like your peppermint mocha creamer, and your 2% milk, very consistent, high volume, but almost no variability. The fact that you can use a single, I think you described it as even a single foundational forecast model that branches in correlations or in relationships to those different product categories based off of their historical performance related to the past data. I think that's just massively important for not only retail, but almost any business organization who has a multi-product or multi-service offering.
Yeah, dairy will have 50 products or 60 products depending on the time of year, maybe more, I'm trying to remember, but it's one of those situations where cottage cheese and sour cream sell very steady. They can be forecasted together. But peppermint mocha creamer should have its own model all by itself. And then the 2% milk can have its own model. And then again, some things might not need a model because the return on investment for developing one just isn't there. Right? We always have to think about that. It's like, what's the cost of not doing a model now? Maybe this we just do this to kind of, we're selling mocha creamer just to get people excited about our brand.
Don't forget pumpkin spice.
Pumpkin spice. Yeah, pumpkin spice. Yeah, it's
Up and to the right. The chart is always up and to the right.
Do we have some examples? I think Dave, you and I are talking about this. I would love to get your thoughts on the healthcare space, a space that's just enormously rich with data and data collected both on an operational efficiency standpoint, a client or customer patient standpoint, even a provider standpoint. I would love to just get your brainstorm, either from experience or tangential experience, on what you would do in that field.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I personally, direct experience working in a business in healthcare. I haven't been in one, but I am right now. I'm a fractional CFO for a specialty pharmacy. And so I help the specialty pharmacy that makes both acute medication for if you have the flu, let's say, or chronic medication for if you have a chronic condition. And a lot of their forecasting, a lot of what we've been working on is understanding what revenue is going to look like for a business. It's very strange when you talk about revenue when it comes to people's health. And the very most important thing you can do is have your #1 KPI for any type of health business be the outcomes for your patients, full stop. But once you're beyond the outcomes for patients, the next thing that you have to be able to predict is actually volume. And it's so interesting to see different types of illnesses have cyclicality to them, just like you would with creamers, right? Like there's pumpkin spice season in the same like there's flu season. And you see different, and they're actually at the same time, which is nice.
Can we borrow your dairy model?
It's convenient. If you just plug these patients into a milk model,
that's right.
it's basically the same thing.
When you see it on the billboard,
correlation.
yeah, you see it on the billboard at,
That's right.
yeah, when you see it on the billboard for Starbucks, be sure you've had your shot.
Yeah, exactly. It gives you the flu. No, but it's really interesting to think about two completely different problems that will be solved in a really similar way, right? We'll think about different types of medication that some are higher margin, and instead of doing, did you say variability of demand, sales? Yeah, so it's the ones that have variability in demand and variability in pricing are so different from the ones that maybe are not variable, but they might actually look more like a type of milk than they do like another type of pill. And it's interesting to look at your portfolio of products, especially if you focus on just medication, and you see some that sell the same way a 2% milk sells, and some sell the same way a peppermint mocha sells. And it's actually more like a product that's not medicine than it is like another product that is also medicine, if that makes sense. So it's as you think about your business, there are unique silos even within your own business where some things look completely different from each other. And probably one of the most important things we've done at that company, and I've done in many other companies as well, is what we call product line profitability or customer line profitability, where you look at each one of your customers or each one of your products, and you try to attribute as much of the actual cost that goes into serving that customer or creating that product, shipping that product, putting labels on that product, having it be on a store shelf, having someone actually buy it, and attribute as much as you can to that so you can actually see which products are driving your revenue and your profit, and which ones might seem like they are high in revenue but actually secretly cost you a lot and secretly are dragging down your business and you'd be more profitable just to get rid of altogether.
Very, very interesting. Thank you. Mike, I think you had a security and risk point.
So
and I do want to preface this with something that I left out of your bio that I should have mentioned, that you actually are a research fellow, I believe, for a nonprofit in this space.
So I work in a nonprofit, really focused on data ethics, and one thing I want everyone to realize is if you're not on a data journey yet in your organization, that's fine, right? And I've always come at this as a scientist, but I've learned to speak business because I've been part of a startup. I'm very jealous, by the way, of Alden's batting 1,000 for his startup. My startup that I'm working on, we're still waiting for the first cent to flow in, and so we're still waiting. But it's going to hit. But he's batting 1,000, and I'm hoping to get batting 1,000. But I talk risk a lot. That's how I talk to business people. As a scientist, I have to talk risk. I'm going to look at each of you and say, there's risk in trying to adopt a data-driven idea of viewpoint and bringing data into your decision-making. There's risk, right? You have to find your data, you might have to hire someone, you might have to learn and be vulnerable that your intuitions aren't all the way right for your business. But there's also risk in not doing that. And this is sort of that risk, like, should I adopt ChatGPT right now? What's the risk of me of doing that? Well, hallucinations, you might get some bad customer reviews. Well, what's the risk of not adopting it? Well, my competitor might adopt it. Or they might adopt it a little bit and really learn it, and then they're going to step on me real bad in Q3, Q4, 2025. So there's risk in adopting, and there's risk in not adopting. Your business leaders, you can assess what risk you are most comfortable with. But it's one of those things that in 2024, with everything that I've seen from my perspective, and I don't know your business, I'd be glad to learn about it, but there's risk in action as well.
I think we can all agree that the world is advancing technologically, maybe at an accelerating pace that we haven't seen in a long time. If you look at the last couple of decades, the degree to which major platform changes have shaped our world is advancing at a rapid rate. And I heard this once, and I think it's applicable to what you just said. In a rapidly changing world, sometimes the riskiest thing that you can do is not change. If we agree that technology is moving at a rapid pace, then inaction can often be the riskiest decision that you can make. Michael, I think you had something you'd like to say.
Yeah, actually, I do have one thought though about that. I want everyone right now to think about your number one competitor. Your number one competitor. And if you could push a button and make all their computers go away, their cell phones, Dr. Perryman would say take away their wheels, they can't have wheels, and one by one take away all those advancements that over time, each of us had to make that decision of, do I adopt it or not? Is there a risk? Is there not? I think Dr. McCarthy says it well, there is risk, absolutely. What's the risk of not? I want to interject a couple of questions. Earlier, I guess, when I said, man, we've cleared them all, that prompted some people to get riled up.
Good.
Just to stick a few of these in, and one of them being just a very technical terminology type question. And Rakava, how about this? Give us kind of a good working definition. These are just terms that folks hear. Data mining versus data profile. We hear those in the news under different scenarios. Can we even split those? And actually, I see the three of y'all looking at each other like, oh my gosh. Okay, Mike's got this one.
This is not worth splitting hairs on. All right, I've actually been in very heated debates about, is it machine learning or is it artificial intelligence? Which one is higher? Which one is no? Don't So data mining is actually a lot of times people will say data mining is where we will get the information. We'll mine the data for information. That's data mining. Data profiling is probably more of the same. But I would not get lost in that. People will use those interchangeably. As an academic, it drives me nuts. But we have to let these things go.
Excellent.
Here's
Here's
talking
another
about the
question.
same things in our free time.
Thanks, Mike. But I also want to add to the point, because this AI area is very rapidly maturing and still in the early stage, there are a lot of terms that are interchangeably used across the board. So as Mike said, don't split your hairs on identifying exact definition of it, but try to get a grasp of what the entirety of it is trying to explain.
Excellent. Okay, on the furthest end of the spectrum from that, right, that's a terminology breakdown. Here's another good one that's 30,000 feet. So when we think of AI, large language models, autonomous systems, smart things, has anyone yet created, or how would you create a gut feel button for your data analysis, where the tool isn't necessarily answering a question, but just observing the data and telling you its own insights about what it thinks is best?
I think if I can answer. See, all these tools or AI, what it's trying to do is, if you can give it a proper training to it, or if you can teach it how you think in a repeatable fashion, I think these tools have the capability to do that. I always say there are three things to build a tool or a culture in an organization. One is the data set. Do you have the right data set to give the information to the tool, or to tell the tool that this is how it has to think? If you want to build your intuition, do you have the data set to say, this is my intuition? Do you have 5,000 records that say, okay, this is the kind of situation I saw, and this is the decision I took? And then the skill set. Do you have enough people or enough, be it technical resources or be it the computational resources, to train that particular model with the data set that you have? And finally, the mindset. Do you have the ability or the courage to believe in that particular intuition? Or do you want to drive that decision through that? So it again boils down to bringing the culture of building those kind of tools that really pays dividends to your business. So
Yeah, I think the short answer for tools like that is yes, it's possible. No, does it necessarily exist right now for your specific industry? Possibly not, but the ingredients are there. It's like you don't have a cake right now, but you have all the ingredients, and you could technically bake it yourself if you wanted to. But these tools are coming out, and if one existed in the next few years for your specific industry, I would not be shocked. And if one of you made it, you'd probably be a billionaire. So
Excellent, excellent. And Alden, as a segue back into the industry by industry approach, the last question comes from the financial industry, but I can see its application across lots of industries.
Perfect.
And specifically, the question is best paraphrased as this. In the financial services industry, as more data-driven tools become available, and as consumers or business owners become comfortable adopting them, there's a transformation occurring between that personal relationship with your advisor, your financial advisor, and this can be banking or wealth management or whatever, and just raw access to data, right? So we've all got these supercomputers in our pocket that'll just spit out tons of data, and watching that transformation from, I used to go to a person for those insights, and now it all lives in my pocket. How can attendees here take advantage? And Mike, I'm thinking about what you said, right? The risk of not adopting it. How can people that have been in advisory roles in the past across all these different industries make that decision to themselves adopt the tools for the sake of maintaining that advisor status with their own clients that are data hungry?
Well, this is a super challenge, right? I'm not gonna, there's no sugarcoating the challenges that people who provide services that now could be reasonably automated or are currently reasonably automated, right? So the key here is there is still, we desire connection, right? So you want to differentiate yourself from the analysis in some way that allows you to still provide value to your customer. And sometimes it is really, I can go down the key here is to provide value to your customer. Amazon strives to be the most customer-centric organization in the world. Does it? I'll let you make up your own mind on that. But we do make decisions with the customer in mind, and that if you put yourself in your customer's seat, if they have a choice between this automated smartphone app and the value you provide, the challenge is showing the value that you do provide. And it can be challenging, and there could be some clients that don't stick around with you. But the ones that do see the value, and you need to continue to show and tell them, actually, perhaps, the value you provide. It's challenging, and this is not an easy use case to solve.
If I could actually jump in with a thought, I saw a really interesting talk on that I think relates to this, and it brought up a good analogy. When it comes to competitive aspects of these technologies, like Dr. Perryman noted, broadly, history would show time and time again that it will create more jobs than it impacts negatively. However, even within that, of course, we're all individuals. I heard the analogy of Microsoft Office. The Microsoft Office suite and computers that it was hosted on, of course, revolutionized the world. Two industries that this analogy focused on particularly were the degree to which Microsoft Word affected the industry of typists, and the degree to which Microsoft Excel impacted the degree of analysis. Two totally divergent outcomes. And it all had to do with the human skill level that was innate in the task on top of what the tool was allowing them to do. Both were very manual before, both were hard to edit before, be it typing on a typewriter or be it in a handmade spreadsheet. But when Word came in, it allowed anyone to very quickly type, very quickly edit, and the role of typist virtually disappeared. When the spreadsheet came in, that made it very easy for just about anyone to calculate on a spreadsheet, to edit a spreadsheet. It actually created many, many more jobs and greatly increased the earning capacity and the economic output for those who were talented and working in spreadsheets. And the divergence being the level of skill and human distinction that was able to be layered on top of those seemingly similar tools. And I think that there's a degree to which that analogy can be carried over into AI and large language models as well.
I've actually heard it used or described as the highest and best use principle of these new tools. Will your job look different, or does the job you have today, will it still exist in a year to 5 years? Probably not, but you will just be your job will just look different than it does today. There are certain aspects of your job that you will no longer have to do personally, but what it allows you to do is think about the tasks or the support you could give to customers that you think right now on January 18th, you think, oh, if I had more time, if I had more energy, if I wasn't doing this, I could be doing that instead. And so when this gets automated, you now get to do this plus. You get to do what you were doing previously because now the computer can do that for you, and you get to do these 5 other things that you couldn't previously.
Proactively identify those tasks within your job and actively, proactively work toward take the initiative to automate those aspects of your job that are at risk and lean more heavily into differentiating yourself in the aspects that Dave, you just mentioned. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's exactly right.
Michael, any other questions from the audience?
Yes, in the area of real estate again, in general, so as real estate developers, right, there's always this question about the timing of coming to market with a product, whether it's commercial, industrial, retail. The question had a lot of facets to it. One of the last one was, can AI help me figure out when I can go on vacation for 2 weeks or 2 months to Europe with my family? We're gonna go past that one. But the more salient part of the question was, from the standpoint of making all these decisions in real estate, data sets. What data sets, and y'all covered this a little bit earlier, but do our panelists have any particular experience with particular data sets that are available in the real estate space? Alden, I know you and I are familiar with, via the multiple listing services, the MLSs, you've got a broad set of data there. Typically, that's going to be focused more on your 1 to 4 family product. In Texas, we have the Texas Real Estate Center at Texas A&M with a lot of data. But do any of the 3 of you have any awareness of large real estate data sets?
So they exist, and for sure. And there's a lot of free ones, and then there's definitely some ones to go pay for. Believe it or not, there's some very interesting data that again, TransUnion has that actually goes down to the household level. Again, it's not without, that one's considerably high cost. I have some, anyone wants to talk to me about TransUnion data, I'd love to talk to you afterwards. But with regard to real estate data, there is actually there's plenty of data out there, but the one thing that we haven't talked about at all, and we talked about, tangentially, was that when you're in real estate, you know what your customers want, right? And sometimes it's bedrooms, sometimes it's square footage, sometimes it's a school district, that's all out there. But when you talk to your customers and they want a walkable community, there might be a database out there for that. Maybe not, probably not. I know there are, and knowing that feature and how to use some sort of walkability or proximity to, X amenity, or this type of space, those are features that we have to identify that our customers want, and then go pull it from the data. It's called feature engineering. I want to make this new thing out of this pile of data over here. And that's second order, that's next level data science. But that's what we would be looking for. We want to listen to our clients, our customers, what do they want? And is there a trend for that? I don't want to do it I can do it if, it's $1 million customer, maybe it's worth it, but you want to capture this trend, and then put it into like that. Those are those kind of next level ideas about how can I take my data. This actually, there was a point that was made by Dave earlier. There's sort of that interval between when someone logs in to the web page and when they want, what's the interval between that? Is it getting longer or getting shorter? Well, the data is always there. We're recording every log. Until when someone goes, well, what the interval is, well, that's a script that takes 2 seconds to write, and goes, oh, this script, this person's interval between logging in is increasing. That's a different feature than logging in now, logging in now, logging in now. The interval between is a whole different feature and has a lot more meaning to it. So bring this all the way back around to your question. There's lots of free data out there. There's lots of data you can buy, but getting more information out of that is the insights that you bring as a professional and listening to your customers and generating those new features, so providing more value.
So if I heard you correctly, that next level of data science, particularly, let's make this a retail example, but within real estate, it's not only the data that might commonly be available from a listing service where we know how many square footage is the warehouse and what kind of power goes into it, but combining that maybe with some GIS data, combining that with other sources of data where for a particular retailer, you're now in a position of knowing all of these ancillary things that matter above and beyond just how big is it and what's the address. It's how big is it, what's the address, what kind of grid is it on from electric delivery system standpoint, transportation, but doing that through a data standpoint, not a one-off research project, but using all those and pulling them into one model, if you will.
And again, it all comes down to customer insights.
Yeah.
Just like every industry, data analysis aside, I think it highlights that data analysis, AI, large language models, are tools to augment and accelerate the core business practices that everyone in this room is already engaging in and know are important. That it can just make that easier, more effective. I want to be sensitive to everyone's time. We want to be here and answer every question that you have, so please come up to us afterwards, talk with us, ask our panelists any questions that could help you and your organization. But I do want to go ahead and begin our wrap-up so that everyone feels free to go on about their day. This is going to be horrible of me, but I'm going to do it anyway. Could each of our panelists share one strong closing thought to summarize? I didn't tell them I was going to do this. I'm the worst moderator. They're going to do this. One strong closing thought to wrap up some of our conversations, even if it's just a repetition of a point that was made earlier.
And I'm gonna give them some thinking time. So that's your question, that's your homework. While they're giving that some thought, recall that the QR code will link you to an email address. If you think of questions afterwards, we can extend this beyond this discussion today. Alden and I have direct relationships with these three gentlemen, and we're happy to continue fielding questions as you think about them over time. So use the QR code and grab that email address. The other thing I mentioned it in passing in the very beginning, also if you'd be interested in sharing the recording today, the video recording with a colleague or just yourself, if you want to review it later, you can also use that same QR code to send us a request for that. We've had some of those come in, so thank you to those that sent. So those are just a couple of housekeeping items. Questions can keep coming in.
Thank you.
So I'm going to just reiterate that there's risk in adopting a data-driven position in your company, and there's a risk in not doing it. And this is one of those things that there are baby steps to be made, and baby steps towards looking into potential pathways of identifying how to make your organization more data-driven to get those insights. They probably cost you $0. And the other thing we talked about earlier, and actually this is a separate nugget, is there's a lot of free stuff out there. There's the open source community in data and in scripting, and what you can leverage that with now with ChatGPT. which is some of it's free, some of it's not, but there's lots of free stuff out there. There's a ton. So once you start scratching the surface, it'll reveal itself very quickly.
I'll reiterate the point that data journey is more of a cultural change rather than a technical change, and it's a journey, and there needs to be constant evolution and constant investment that needs to happen for businesses to flourish or for businesses to continue sustaining in this technological way. So I think the last takeaway I would say is you should focus on 3 aspects: the data set, the skill set, and the mindset, and that will eventually lead to a cultural change in any organization.
And playing off that journey point, I know that people in the room here might be in different stages of their data-driven decision-making journey, whether you're going from 0 to 1, or you are doing it now but would like to get better, or you feel that you're advanced and you'd like to optimize. I would just say at each one of those different stages, from 0 to 1, the most important thing that you can do is to build this culture around actually starting to make these decisions using information, and probably the quickest way to do that is to build that basic equation of your business. What's the this plus this equals that? And how do we have creating a product to then having it cost something and having it end up in a customer's hands, and recognizing what are the most important gating items at each one of those stages, and how can I start to measure and make decisions off of those. If you're in the middle, start to think about how you are optimizing the KPIs that you know are used in your industry and that you are currently tracking and using yourself. But then start to think about what makes you different from other people, and what is it that it has been a thorn in your side that you've been told is an unsolvable problem or just natural for your business, but maybe if you think of it in a couple different ways and you have a couple different hypotheses, you could test something to fix it. And with the last group, that's where I would start to integrate AI and large language models. It's, until you can get those first 2 sections done, I really would focus on the philosophy and the practice, the people and the process, and then at the end we can add more tools.
Fantastic. With that, thank you all so much for your time.